It just made history, the wrong kind of history. Typhoon Sinlaku has just delivered the strongest typhoon strike on United States soil since 1962, 63 years. That is how long it has been since anything this powerful hit American territory in the Pacific. And the islands of Saipan and Tinian, both United States territories in the Northern Mariana Islands, just took a direct hit, not a glancing blow, not a near miss, a direct strike from a typhoon packing sustained winds that put it among the most powerful storms to ever touch American ground, anywhere. And I have to say, when the data started coming in, when I saw the wind speeds, when I saw the damage footage emerging from Saipan, I had to stop, because what is happening on those islands right now is not something these communities have experienced in living memory. Most people alive on Saipan today were not born the last time a storm this powerful came through, and now they are living through it in real time. Roofs gone. Structures collapsed. Trees stripped bare, power out across entire islands, and the full picture of what Sinlaku has done is only beginning to emerge. Let me take you through exactly what happened, how strong this storm actually was, what the people on these islands are experiencing right now, and why this storm, in this location, at this moment in history, tells us something important about where we are headed, because further into this video, I am going to show you what the historical record of typhoons in the Mariana Islands looks like, and why what Sinlaku just did was not supposed to happen at this intensity. Not here, not now, not in April. So let's establish exactly where we are. The Northern Mariana Islands, a commonwealth of the United States, sitting in the western Pacific Ocean, approximately 2,400 kilometers, about 1,500 miles, east of the Philippines, about 2,500 kilometers south of Japan. These islands are American territory. The people who live there are American citizens. Saipan is the largest island and the capital, population approximately 50,000 people. Tinian, a smaller island just 5 kilometers, 3 miles south of Saipan, population approximately 3,000 people, small communities, tight communities, communities that have built their lives on these islands in the middle of the Pacific, and Typhoon Sinlaku just tore through both of them. Now let's talk about the numbers, because the numbers are what make this historic. Typhoon Sinlaku made landfall with sustained winds recorded at approximately 140 miles per hour, that is 225 kilometers per hour. In Atlantic hurricane terminology, that is Category 4 intensity, bordering Category 5. And in typhoon classification, where the Western Pacific produces the most powerful tropical cyclones on Earth, Sinlaku arrived as a significant and destructive storm. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center. The U.S. military's typhoon forecasting operation based in Pearl Harbor had been tracking Sinlaku as it rapidly intensified in the Western Pacific, and the track models locked in on Saipan and Tinian with disturbing precision, no uncertainty, no wobble in the forecast track, straight at American soil. And the rapid intensification, the process by which a tropical cyclone strengthens dramatically in a short period, was one of the most concerning aspects of Sinlaku's development. Rapid intensification is defined as a wind speed increase of at least 35 miles per hour in 24 hours or less. Sinlaku exceeded that threshold, and it exceeded it as it approached populated islands, giving residents less time to prepare than a slower intensification would have allowed. Now let's talk about what 140 mile per hour winds actually do to buildings, to infrastructure, to everything human beings have built on these islands, because we throw wind speed numbers around. We say 140 miles per hour and it sounds dramatic, but let me make it real. At 140 miles per hour, wind pressure on a building surface is approximately 10 times greater than at 50 miles per hour. The relationship between wind speed and destructive force is not linear. It is exponential. At 140 miles per hour, a standard residential structure that has not been built to the most rigorous typhoon codes will fail. Roofs peel off, not bend, bend, not crack, peel cleanly, like the lid coming off a box. Because at those wind speeds, the pressure differential between the inside of a building and the outside generates lift forces on the roof structure that exceed the fastening capacity of standard construction. And when the roof goes, the walls follow, because the structural integrity of most buildings depends on the roof to keep the wall-to-wall and wall-to-foundation connections under compression. Remove the roof, and the walls are free to be pushed by the wind. Windows shatter. Not from direct wind pressure, but from debris, from tree branches, from roof tiles, from signs, from anything the wind picks up and turns into a projectile moving at 140 miles per hour. Telephone poles snap, power lines go down, roads become rivers as storm surge and rainfall combine, and storm surge, the dome of ocean water that a powerful typhoon pushes ahead of itself, inundates coastlines. On low-lying islands like Saipan and Tinian, with extensive coastal development, storm surge can penetrate far inland, salt water in homes, salt water in freshwater wells, salt water in agricultural soil. The damage from storm surge often outlasts the physical damage from wind because the contamination it leaves behind takes months or years to clear. This is what Sinlaku delivered to Saipan and Tinian. Now let's talk about the people who lived through this, because this is the part that stays with me. Residents of Saipan had warning. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center and local emergency management authorities issued alerts. Evacuation orders were issued for the most vulnerable coastal areas, shelters were opened in hardened government buildings, and residents made the decisions that people in the path of powerful storms always have to make. Do I stay? Do I go? Is my house strong enough? Will the shelter be safer? Can I get there in time? One resident, quoted in early reports coming out of Saipan, described sheltering in an interior room of a concrete building with her family, children, elderly parents, listening to the wind. She said she had lived through typhoons before. Typhoon Yutu in 2018 was bad, but she said this one sounded different. The sound was lower, more constant, like the island itself was being pressed down. That description, from someone who knows typhoons, tells you something that wind speed numbers alone cannot. Another resident reported that his roof failed during the eye wall passage. The eye wall, the ring of the most intense winds surrounding the calm center of a typhoon, is where the greatest destruction concentrates. When the eye wall passed over Saipan, that is when structures that had survived the outer bands met the full force of what Sinlaku had to offer, his roof gone, in the time it took him to realize what was happening, and I have to say, I feel the weight of that. A man whose home he built, whose family sheltered in, gone in an instant. That is not a statistic. That is a life changed in a moment by a storm. Before we go deeper, can you do me a favor? If this is bringing you information about American citizens on American soil experiencing a historic storm, information that is not getting the national attention it deserves, give this video a like and a hype. Share it. Leave me a comment. Tell me, did you even know the Northern Mariana Islands were being hit by the strongest typhoon in 63 years? Because most people on the U.S. mainland had no idea this was happening. These are American citizens. They deserve to be seen. It costs you nothing, and it helps this channel enormously. All right, let's get into the science and the history, because to understand why Sinlaku is historically significant, you need to understand the typhoon climatology of the Mariana Islands and why April is not supposed to produce storms like this. The Western Pacific typhoon season, unlike the Atlantic hurricane season, which has a defined June through November window, the Western Pacific produces tropical cyclones year-round. There is no month in which a Western Pacific typhoon is impossible. But there are months where the conditions that produce the most intense typhoons, the warm sea surface temperatures, the low wind shear, the favorable atmospheric patterns, are statistically less common. April is one of those months. April is early season. April sea surface temperatures in the Mariana Islands region, while warm, are typically not at the peak Values seen during August, September, October, the months when Western Pacific super typhoons historically develop. And yet, Sinlaku rapidly intensified in April to Category 4 equivalent intensity and struck American soil with winds not seen there since 1962. The question that meteorologists are now examining closely is what made that April intensification possible. And the answer points directly to ocean heat content, not just sea surface temperature, not the temperature of the top few meters of water, but the depth of warm water, how far down the warmth extends, because a powerful typhoon, as it moves across the ocean, mixes the water beneath it. It brings up cooler water from below, and normally, that upwelling of cooler water acts as a brake on intensification. It limits how strong the storm can get, but when the warm water extends deep, when there is a thick layer of ocean heat beneath the surface, the upwelling effect is weakened. The storm keeps drawing energy from warm water beneath it, and it intensifies rapidly. In the Western Pacific, including in the Mariana Islands region, ocean heat content measurements in recent years have shown that the warm layer extends deeper than historical averages, more total heat energy available for tropical cyclone intensification, and Sinlaku drew on that heat in April when it was not supposed to be this strong and struck two islands that had not faced anything this powerful since 1962. Now, let me take you through that historical context because I did a little research, and the history of major typhoons in the Mariana Islands is both sobering and illuminating. The 1962 typhoon that Sinlaku has now surpassed in intensity struck at a time when Saipan had a much smaller population. Infrastructure was simpler, less developed, fewer buildings, fewer people. The destruction was severe, but the exposure, the number of people and structures in harm's way, was a fraction of what exists today. Saipan developed significantly through the latter decades of the 20th century. A tourism industry grew. Hotels, resorts, infrastructure expanded, and the population grew. All of that development, all of that infrastructure, all of those homes and businesses and hotels and roads and power lines were built in the decades after 1962. Meaning they were built by a population that had not experienced a storm of this intensity, whose construction standards, however modern, had never been tested by winds this powerful on this soil. And Typhoon U2 in 2018, which was itself the most powerful typhoon to strike U.S. territory since at least 1935 at the time, reached Category 5 intensity with winds of 180 miles per hour, 180 miles per hour. And it devastated Saipan and Tinian. Over 130 homes destroyed on Tinian alone. Thousands of structures damaged on Saipan, billions of dollars in damage, and recovery that took years. Sinlaku at 140 miles per hour is less intense than U2 at 180, but the historical benchmark being broken is different. Sinlaku is being identified as the strongest typhoon to strike U.S. soil since 1962 based on specific landfall intensity metrics and the particular nature of this April event. In a month that historically has not produced such storms over American Pacific territories, and it is striking islands that are still, in some ways, still recovering from U2, infrastructure that was rebuilt, now being tested again, communities that went through the trauma of a catastrophic typhoon in 2018, now going through it again in 2025. The psychological weight of that, on top of the physical destruction, is immense. Now let's talk about what comes immediately after Sinlaku passes, because the storm itself is only the first chapter. What follows is often what determines the true scale of the disaster. First, search and rescue. As soon as conditions allow, as soon as sustained winds drop below safe operating thresholds for rescue personnel, teams will move through Saipan and Tinian, checking shelters, clearing rubble, looking for anyone trapped, anyone injured, anyone who did not make it to safety. The early reports from within the islands are fragmentary right now. Communications infrastructure is severely damaged. Power is out across both islands. Cell towers are down. And in that communication blackout, the true picture of casualties and injuries is not yet clear. What is clear is that the damage is severe, is widespread, and will take time to fully assess. Second, Water and food security. Saipan and Tinian rely on infrastructure, pumping stations, treatment facilities, distribution systems that has now been compromised by the storm. Clean water access will be one of the most immediate and critical concerns in the hours and days ahead. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has pre-positioned resources in the region ahead of the storm, but getting those resources onto islands with damaged port infrastructure and potentially compromised airfield conditions takes time. Every hour that passes without clean water, without medical supplies, without food distribution is an hour of additional suffering for American citizens on American soil. Third, power restoration. The electrical grid on Saipan was already aging before Sinlaku. Reconstruction after Typhoon Yutu in 2018 was not complete, and now the grid has been struck again by a storm of historic intensity. Full power restoration on small Pacific islands after major typhoons often takes weeks, sometimes months. People will be living without electricity, without refrigeration, without air conditioning in tropical heat and humidity for an extended period. Fourth, mental health. I keep coming back to this because it is always the last thing that gets talked about, and it is always one of the most lasting consequences. The people of Saipan and Tinian are not encountering a typhoon for the first time. Many of them carry the trauma of Yutu, of previous storms, and now they are adding the experience of Sinlaku on top of that. Post-traumatic stress in post-typhoon communities is well documented, and for small island communities where everyone knows everyone, where community identity is bound up in the physical landscape that has just been shattered, the recovery is not just physical, it is psychological, it is cultural, it is the question of who we are when the place that made us has been destroyed. Now, let's zoom out because Sinlaku, in the context of 2025 Western Pacific typhoon activity, raises questions that go beyond this one storm. The Western Pacific has been producing powerful tropical cyclones with increasing frequency of rapid intensification events. The ability of storms to go from tropical storm to major typhoon intensity in 24 to 48 hours has been documented as increasing, and rapid intensification is the characteristic that most undermines warning effectiveness because the window between a manageable storm and a catastrophic one narrows dramatically. Communities that might have had 72 hours to prepare for a strong storm find themselves with 24 hours to prepare for a devastating one. And on small islands, with limited evacuation options, with populations that cannot simply drive inland, that shortened warning window has consequences. Sinlaku's April rapid intensification over waters that are warmer and deeper in their heat content than historical averages is exactly the scenario that tropical meteorologists have been warning about. And it just happened to American citizens on American soil. Now what? So what are we watching in the immediate aftermath? First, FEMA's federal disaster declaration process for U.S. territories struck by major natural disasters. A federal disaster declaration unlocks federal recovery funding. Given the historic nature of Sinlaku's strike, that declaration should be forthcoming. But the process, the speed, the adequacy of the federal response will be watched closely. These are American citizens who pay federal taxes and serve in the American military, in a territory that has no voting representation in Congress. They deserve a response proportional to their need, not proportional to their political visibility. Second, infrastructure assessment. Engineers will need to assess every major structure on Saipan and Tinian: the port, the airport, the power plant, the water treatment systems, the hospitals, the schools. Every piece of critical infrastructure that the recovery depends on needs to be evaluated before it can be used, and that assessment takes time that the community does not have. Third, the communication blackout. Right now, information from inside Saipan and Tinian is limited, fragmentary, filtered through whatever satellite communications are still functioning. As that blackout lifts, as reporters and assessment teams gain access, the full picture of what Sinlaku did will emerge. And based on the wind speeds recorded, based on the storm surge potential, Based on what we know about what Category 4 equivalent winds do to developed island communities, that picture will not be easy to look at. Fourth, the next storm, because typhoon season does not pause for recovery. The Western Pacific continues generating tropical cyclones, and an island community with a destroyed power grid, compromised water infrastructure, thousands of people in damaged or destroyed homes, is dramatically more vulnerable to the next storm than it was to this one. Recovery has to happen, and it has to happen fast because the ocean does not wait. So guys, let's bring this all together. Typhoon Sinlaku, the strongest typhoon to strike United States soil since 1962, 63 years, direct hit on Saipan and Tinian. American citizens, American territory, sustained winds of approximately 140 miles per hour. 225 kilometers per hour, rapid intensification driven by anomalously deep ocean heat content. Striking in April, a month that historically has not produced storms of this intensity over American Pacific territories, following a track of near-perfect precision that gave these islands no escape. The destruction is severe, the communication blackout is real, the recovery will be long, and the people of Saipan and Tinian, who have already survived Typhoon Yutu, who have already rebuilt once, who are American citizens living 10,000 miles from Washington, D.C., deserve the full weight of national attention, full federal support, and the recognition that what happened to them is not a distant foreign disaster. It happened on American soil, to American people. I will stay on this story. As communications are restored and the full damage picture emerges, you will know. As the federal response develops, you will know. As meteorologists analyze what made Sinlaku's April intensification possible and what it tells us about future typhoon seasons, you will hear it here. Check the end screen for my other videos on Pacific typhoon history and the broader story of what is happening with tropical cyclone intensification in the Western Pacific right now, because Sinlaku is not an isolated event. It is a data point in a pattern, and that pattern demands our attention. If you want to support the channel, the coffee link is in the description. No brands, no promotions, just keeping this running so I can stay on the pulse for you. Thank you to everyone watching, everyone sharing, everyone who makes sure these stories reach the people who need to hear them. Stay safe, guys. Be aware. Bye-bye.